pleasure to introduce Robert Law. Many of you will know Robert because he's been giving an annual lecture about Apollo for 2 years now. Yes. And we're running up for Apollo missions, aren't we? I'll do it today. It's the last Apollo mission, Apollo 17. Now, Robert is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to space, in particular, and astronomy. He actually been in space, but I can't think of anybody who seems to know more about Apollo missions and space travel. Also, if you go over to Dundee and visit Mills Observatory, you'll be in his expert hands as he shows people who run and looks after the observatory over there. And he's been a member of pretty much, it seems like, every astronomical society around here. And currently is our vice president, which is your second time being vice president.
Yeah, I did that back.
Yeah, Zoom makes it easier for someone when you be a member of the council. So, handing over to Robert for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 17 mission.
So it's a great honour for me to be asked to do this on the 50th anniversary of the last flight to the moon. 50 years ago today, the astronauts were beginning the Moon-Earth transit on the return journey. It's also a great honour to do the John Brown Memorial talk. John Brown, the astronomer, loyal for Scotland as he was a great friend of mine, he was a great supporter of me. And quite often that John would get in touch. I'll never forget the first time. It was Sunday night and I was watching the TV and the phone rang and it was the astronomer. Why am I? She's phoning me up. And that was because at the time in the Discovery Space Club we were doing something that nobody else was doing, and that was that this is way back in the 80s, we were doing dark sky astronomy at Mills Country Park. There's often things like that he'd asked me about. The most recent one, of course, was a few years back when John had been visiting the Taurus Observatory where I used to work, and he'd asked me to write up a thing for him about the public observatories in Scotland, and I've been very honoured that I've worked in 3 of these, when I've had connection with Paisley and Airdrie, and of course Dundee. But moving on to Apollo 17 now, I got interested in space flight at the age of 8 years of age, and that was, it was at a primary school in Linwood, and it was a book about the geography book, and I always loved maps, and on the back page, it showed you the moon, and the way it was done like a 3D object, and I realised then that the moon wasn't a lunar light in the sky, that this was, it's another world, a place that you can go. And the year, of course, was 1968, I don't have any memory of Apollo 8. In fact, the problem was that my parents weren't really interested in space, I'd imagine. But it wasn't until the following year that the earliest space-related thing I could remember was my dad called me in off the street, and it was Apollo 9. And Rusty Schweikart was doing the spacewalk, and they were testing the lunar module in the Earth's orbit, And it would get eventually to meet almost all the Apollo astronauts. Sadly, I never got a chance to meet Neil Armstrong. I met Gene Cernan, who was on 17. We're going to be talking about an example now. So one day the teacher brought in a magazine for me to the school, and it was because I was interested in space, and it must have been the Sunday Times supplement. And it was these 3 men have got a ticket to go to the moon, and of course that was Apollo 11. So I was hooked on space, ever since, and I watched. So I was lucky, I'm a child of Apollo, I managed to see all of these missions, or I saw bits of them. And we talk about a thing that really began at Christmas, and ended at Christmas. So so when you went on, you were selected for a flight to the moon. These crews, they would design a mission badge. Most of the time, the astronauts would really do this, a lot of this themselves. But on this flight, we got the space artist Robert McCall to design the patch. And this was quite important because it was like Apollo 11 and Britain in a set, which was important. This would be the last time. And there's you see the bust of Apollo, who's looking out the heavens, and we see like the shape of the American eagle, and the three stars represent the three astronauts, and you can see that the wing has touched the moon. That represents that we've been to the moon. And our gaze is out into the heavens. When Apollo ended, this was the case for me, because my next step, really after this, was to become an amateur astronomer. And this is the statue somewhere in Italy, the artist that designed it, that Bob McCall used for this picture. So when we're going to the moon, we would select Deke Slayton, who had been one of the original 7 Mercury astronauts at the beginning of the US space program, and he was grounded for medical reasons, and he didn't eventually get a flight until the last Apollo mission, which was Apollo Soyuz in 1975. He became like in charge of selecting the people who would go on these flights, and you needed 3 people and obviously you had a commander, you had a command module pilot who was basically, as Dick Gordon said to me, that he got the best job because he gets to fly the Saturn V, and you would have a lunar module pilot, and he's the guy that's going to fly and land the thing on the moon. Originally, there was going to be a lot more Apollo missions than what there was. And originally, and at one point, and I'll talk about this in a minute or two, but at one point it wasn't really clear that this flight was going to happen. And originally, the crew that probably should have been on this flight would have been Dick Gordon and Vance Brand. So Dick Gordon, he flew on Apollo 12, and Vance Brand flew on the Apollo Soyuz mission, and later flew on the Challenger, and there'd be somebody else, The problem was that they wanted to send a scientist to the moon. The NASA had actually selected, I think it was 1966, they selected a group of science astronauts. And they wanted to send a geologist. But the budget was being cut, under the Nixon administration. We'll talk about this in a bit of detail in a minute or two. And like Apollo 20, 19, and 18 were cancelled. And Nixon really wanted to cancel Apollo 16 and Apollo 17, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what that was. But unfortunately that didn't happen. And so eventually the crew that they picked eventually was Gene Cernan, who was the commander, Joe Engel, who was the lunar module pilot, and Ron Evans, who would be the command module pilot. So out of these 3, Gene Cernan was the only experienced astronaut. He'd flown in the Gemini mission with Michael Collins, I think it was, and he did the spacewalk where he nearly died in that spacewalk, where there were a whole lot of problems. He then flew to the moon on Apollo 10 in May of 1969 with Tom Stafford and John Young. And he was on that. He very nearly got killed in that one because he flipped 2 switches in the lunar module at ascent stage in the wrong position, and they went down They didn't land on the moon, but they got down pretty close, and then they were coming back up, and NASA deliberately made sure there wasn't enough fuel in the tank just in case he was persuaded to land, and the thing went haywire. He got away with that because the General Staff had said that he was the commander, so the buck stopped him, basically. And when he was selected for the flight the Jim McDivitt, who was one of the early astronauts, and he was in charge, he was the manager of the Apollo program, and he wasn't kind of greatly happy about Cernan getting the job because he had fairly recently just survived a helicopter accident on the Indian River where he nearly got killed, you know. Then the problem basically was the science community was having a big stink up about the fact that we need a geologist on this flight. And that meant that poor Joe Engle was getting bumped from Apollo 17. Joe Engle had flown the X-15 rocket plane, so that's how he got his astronaut wings, like Neil Armstrong. They didn't get it by going on Apollo, they got it on the X-15 space flight. And he'd flown on that. So Gene Cernan was not at all happy about one of his crewmates being forced off the flight, and he wasn't having it. So there was a huge rumpus with the NASA management. And he was told, well, basically, you know, Schmitt's going, and if you don't like it, you know, we'll just bring on the backup crew. So at that point, then he had to stand down, basically, and so he accepted it. So that so you got Harrison Schmitt. So Harrison Schmitt here became the only professional scientist to go to the moon. And so that was that, you know. But there becomes a threat to Apollo 17 again. Because this is President Nixon. President Nixon came into office whether that be about 1969, I think, I can't remember. So when Nixon came in, basically the budget was in a mess, and he wanted to cut the budget, basically. And it's a bit like what happened here fairly recently, the big carry on with the UK economy. The Nixon administration had kind of messed up the budget, and they got themselves in a whole lot of problems in that. They had to make cuts, and it wasn't just NASA that was getting in trouble. Now, Richard Nixon, he's not anti-space. Richard Nixon he's not like Barack Obama, for example. He actually genuinely has an interest in space. And what's not commonly well known is that Nixon he actually had a better knowledge about space than what John F. Kennedy has. He was the vice president to Eisenhower, and it was Richard Nixon that actually suggested setting up NASA. Because Eisenhower, being the president, he gets all the credit and all the rest of it. But it was actually Richard Nixon who actually proposed setting up NASA. And not only did he propose it, he wanted it really to do things. But the point is that when Nixon gets into office, he's not really, he gets all the glory of Apollo and all the rest of it. He never mentions the name of Kennedy whatsoever, but he's quite happy, he takes a lot of the credit. But they loved meeting astronauts, had them at the White House all the time, very close to Frank Borman. I think he wanted him to be his NASA administrator, which Frank didn't want to do. Getting great at socializing with all these guys, and in Apollo 11, before it went, he arranged a world tour and all the rest of it. There's no idea that it was going to be successful, but he went ahead and he did all that. The first kind of bad thing that kind of shook President Nixon was that they asked him to record a message, and the result that Apollo 11 would go wrong and the astronauts would die, you know, which there was more than a 50% chance that they weren't going to come back. What really affected President Nixon was Apollo 13. It affected me. I was only 10 at the time, and it was one of the worst things at that point that happened because I prayed to God every night that the astronauts would come back. And I remember the next door neighbour across the way, they'd had baby, and the baby was born with home heart, and there was a big thing about the baby, was it, and praying to God for the baby. And tragically what happened was that the baby died, but the astronauts get back. So Apollo 13 scared Nixon. But by the time we get to 1972, we're looking at the elections coming up. And Nixon was not going to have any disasters. He was feared there got some space disaster, and that was going to muck up his chances of getting elected and all the rest of it. So he thought, well, we'll just cancel Apollo 16 and 17. But there was a big rumpus about that. We weren't going to do that. There was huge post-Apollo plans with what they were going to do. There could be a whole basis of another talk. And he wasn't prepared to go down that route. Richard Nixon believed that space should just be like, there's a thing in space policy, there's the Nixon, or there's agenda, but there's a name of it, you know, called it. He came out with this thing, which has really stuck for 40 years. In many respects, Richard Nixon has more effective space policy than what John F. Kennedy did. And Nixon's rules basically was that NASA would have to be treated just like the Department of Commerce, the Department of Justice, the Social Security. It can't have these ridiculous astronomical, you know, mad spending billions of dollars, you know, and that we would have to use space, basically, and that's how we go towards the space shuttle. And the result of that is that the Americans then find themselves trapped in low Earth orbit for 50 years going nowhere, basically. The Saturn V had to be cancelled to get Fletcher, the administrator, agreed to cancelling the Saturn V moon rocket in order to enable that he would get the space shuttle, you know. They were still working on the Mars Never program, and Nixon was a bit fearful to cancel this because the jobs were in his constituency, and it was kept at a very low level and all that before they eventually cancelled it. So they persuaded him, we'll delay Apollo 17 to December. And Nixon agreed, and that's the only reason why Apollo 17 really happened, because it was delayed until December. But there was one other threat to Apollo 17, and that was the threat of terrorism. Now, if you go back to the early 70s, what did we see in 1972? I can remember watching the Olympic Games. I was really interested in sport. After seeing astronauts walking the moon to the sport, to these like watching on paper track. Both this fascination about TV, and it's related to my interest in space. And I remember, you know, it was Mary Peters, I think, from Northern Ireland, and she won a medal. I remember that at the Olympics. But we became infamous because of the terrorist blacks in September. So they put out a threat on Apollo 17. What were they going to do? They weren't going to blow up Saturn V rocket, but what they planned to do was to kidnap the astronauts' families. Well, Artemis Schmitt was like myself, who's a bachelor, so he didn't have a family, you know. But Cernan and Evans had families, you know. And initially NASA kept this from the astronauts because they didn't want, you know, to upset them. They had to be told eventually. And the guy that was in charge of security at the Kennedy Space Center was Charles Buckley, or I don't know if he was a relation of Ed Buckley, but Charles Buckley, and his nickname was Super Cop, and he was in charge of all the security. And it so happens that the number on his official Cape Kennedy, that Kennedy Space Center, his security badge was 007. And in this case, in Apollo 17, he was given an actual license to kill. If anybody went anywhere near these astronauts, they'd be shot on sight. They actually put a steel door on the crew quarters building, and there was a guy with a machine gun standing outside in case there's any attempt on the astronauts on the way out to the launch pads. And Chris Kraft told the story that how on Interstate 10 outside of Beaumont in Texas, the car was stopped and they had up-team guns and all the rest of it on board. And they reckoned that was part of that. So fortunately, that terrorist it never happened. The problem was, where are you going to have your landing sites? And this is Tsiolkovsky, which is on the far side of the moon, because both Schmitt and Cernan wanted a landing on the far side. And that just simply wasn't going to happen, because at that point NASA just simply didn't have the money. And it would involve placing a Taurus satellite, like was normally used for weather, beyond the moon, so that Houston could be in contact. You see, and the Chinese have actually took China almost 50 years. China is the first country to actually achieve that, because they have got a rover which is working on the South Pole at the backside of the moon. Or if there's any pink flag fans here, that side of the moon, which of course has been astronomers technically wrong. So that was ruled out. So then you've got this is kind of should have maybe get that. I think that's Tycho. Wait, Tycho is one of them. This program is not showing me the names that you're so these various, I recognise that when that's descending. These were all looked at before they eventually went for Taurus Littrow. And why did they go to Taurus Littrow? Because they were after what they were wanting was evidence of volcanism on the moon. And it was back in the day, there was lots of arguments about the lunar craters, were they volcanic or were they meteoric? So my late friend Sir Patrick got it completely wrong. He believed that they were meteor impact craters. He believed that they were volcanoes and they were really meteoric impact craters. But Taurus Littrow was different to other parts of the moon, and they thought they might find some evidence of it there. It's also quite a kind of difficult site to get to, because the geography is a bit like Apollo 13. So that's the helicopter, the Bell helicopter, the Indian River, which is the Space Center near Titusville. And he was flying that helicopter, and then he got his height wrong or something, and it crashed. He came out unscathed, really, but that was. If you grew up in the 60s, you'll recognise this. It's the Bell X1 or whatever from 1947. And the last time we were at the Space Center in 2019, we went to the Kennedy Space Center airport. There's a museum, an aerospace museum there, and they had one of these helicopters on there. Well, maybe, I don't know if it was that one anyway. But if you grew up in the 60s, Batman, it was used in the Bat helicopter. Skippy, which I love, there's a little boy, that was used in Skippies. So that's the For all the Apollo missions, you did about 3 years of training. So there's Gene Cernan, who's doing some of the geological training. This is training, you're getting putting on spacesuits and adjusting to the different, this is actual flight hardware, so this is a lunar roving vehicle, and there's the Challenger, the lunar module was Challenger, and the command module was called America. From late 1970 onwards, parts of the equipment would begin arriving in Florida. And just like I did watching SLS, so this is the first stage. It comes in, I think it came in the barge, with the Pegasus barge. And then it goes into the vehicle assembly building, and so these get it stacked. So back in 2013, Gordon got me and Elaine Malone and Aileen Malone and her family. We got a VIP tour, and there were specific instructions given to the people at KFC, because Dick couldn't be there. We saw him at night time that night, where his Saturn V was stacked. So then you have at this point, the second stage has been put on. The third stage is flown in with the Guppy airplane, and then there's an adapter section bolted on here. And this in reality is part of the Apollo spaceship, because that goes beyond Earth orbit, So that's like, it's just like the interim cryogenic stage that we use on Artemis. This is then testing America and Challenger before the flight. What's happening there is that they're making sure that the docking probe would attach and lock to the lunar module. And in various Apollo missions, I think Apollo 14 and Apollo 16, I think it was Apollo 14 had issues for this. So that's them doing the kind of thick checks. Boeing made the moon cap, the Apollo lunar roving vehicle. People think that electric cars are new, forgotten. They happened 50 years ago. But they're actually a lot older than that, because it was about a couple of months ago, Elon put a tweet out about an electric car in 1895 that I didn't know that they had as early as that. So that's it, arriving at the Space Center. And this photograph is actually, what's going on in this photograph is that they are actually testing out that they put it inside the lunar module, and what you do is you pull a cable on the outside, and then it holds it. It's like B&Q flat pack furniture that pops out. So what we're seeing in this photograph, this is them actually testing that it would deploy. So in other words, that when Cernan and Schmitt went round and they pulled the cable, and then the thing was jammed, and they got used to that. Well, a lot of the conspiracy nutcases can't understand why how can you have a car on the moon? Where did you put that? So it puts it stored inside one of the quadrants of the world. So here we can see the Challenger, they're bringing that in near America in this here framework. Both of these spacecraft went inside a chamber, pressure chamber, where the astronauts went in and they did a simulated flight to check there was no leaks, etc. In fact, the Orion spacecraft that is just recently returned from the moon is going back to Plum Creek, and it's going back and put it back in the pressure chamber again to see how it's performed after flight. This is my favourite part of is Peter Fairley, ITN space correspondent. He called it the spaceship, James Buck and Patrick Moore are going to talk about in a few minutes. James Buck basically went to NASA, read up all the technical jargon and all the rest, and he used all the NASA, CN and all the rest of it. But what was good about Peter Fairley, he tried to simplify it for the ordinary Joe public that was watching to understand this high tech. And here we can actually see the sky. This is the Skylab getting ready at the Skylab space station, and the Saturn V rocket being inside the vehicle assembly building, being prepared for the follow-on program to follow. How big is this? It's about the size of it's about a 3-story house. It's taken up on a crane, and then it's then attached to the top of the third stage. And on the top of the third stage here, you get the instrument ring, which is computers that basically did all the flying of the Saturn V vehicle. And Werner von Braun said that this was the most important part of the whole. And then once you do all that, you get a rollout. So the rollout of Apollo 17 happened in August of 1972. And I watched it, because back in those days, you couldn't see that. You didn't see that, wasn't on TV or anything. So on the SLS, for example, I watched live as it came out in the last year's the first time we did that way back in summer, because I hadn't, the last time I've seen anything like that was in 1973. It's coming out on mobile launch pads. And that's the astronauts have a look at the rocket. Now, when it came to over 50,000 people turned out, a lot of people wrongly thought that Apollo 17 was the last Saturn V, because it wasn't. Skylab was the last. So, who's this guy here? Right? This is a guy called Charlie Schmitt. And in Brevard County, he was quite a local VIP. He was quite young. He claimed that he was born in Liberia in 1842. It was quite a character. And he was sold, or tricked, as he said, into visit America, when he was tricked into slavery. He became a slave. And when he died in 1979, he claimed that by that time he was claiming that he was 137 years old. So he was given, NASA invited, and various VIPs were invited to the launch of Apollo 17. So they invited Charlie, and he just didn't believe it, and he said that I can't do the American Florida type of accent, And he says, yeah, nobody going to know me. Me, you, or anybody else, Charlie said. And when Apollo 17 was launched, I see they're going somewhere, but that don't mean anything. In 1973, BBC television made a program about him, Yesterday's Witness. And in 1978, the public broadcasting system in the United States did a film called Charlie Schmitt and the Fritter Tree. He came to America in 1854, and the promise that they are fritter trees, I don't know what they are. He was tricked into slavery. He escapes from being a slave. He joins the Union Army, the Civil War. And after the war, he heads out west, where he chases Billy the Kid and rounds the Jesse James. And apparently Charlie would sit and tell that to anybody that would listen to him, So he was so there was a big debate about this, who was he, Apollo 17 was a night launch. It was the only Apollo mission launched at night time. Artemis was not meant to go at night. They didn't want the first one to go at night time. But Apollo 17 would. So there's the launch. And there's the came back to retract the lunar module. Now the thing about space, and the TV and all the rest of it. And obviously I was only 12 at the time of Apollo 12. So Apollo 17, and didn't have video recorders or anything like that. The other video recorders just start to come out, you have to be very rich to own one. So this is the thing that I monitor Apollo space missions, and I've been doing that with the clock since the 60s. This is the TV schedule. And these are the kind of things in the space mission nowadays I want to record. And with Artemis one, I managed to get everything. And I actually saw all one. There was only one event that happened when I was in the Mills Observatory. And I had the guy up from the Lancashire Astronomy Society to see me on the side. I missed that. That was the first picture of it. Now, the problem with Apollo 17, by the time we get to 17, most guys like me, going to the moon is quite normal. It's amazing now, but then most people took it for granted. We used to call it moonshots, you know. And by well before Apollo 17, the media basically were interested in space. So you didn't get to see what it's all like today, you know. So normally what would have happened was that you would see the transposition, the docking, and the linking up with the lunar module. But the Apollo 17, with all the problems, Nixon trying to cancel it, then there was a terrorist threat, and when we survived all these things and we get down to a countdown, it was the only Apollo flight that we run into problems. And the countdown had to be stopped. And there was a 2-hour delay. And it was something to do with computer switches in the wrong position, and the third stage was not pressurized properly. And so eventually I love this GET, you get EST, which means Eastern Standard Time, and GET, what happens that's called ground elapsed time. So that when we set off out the mission, in Apollo, the clock is at nothing. And the time that we use is ground elapsed time. And the mission is then all planned out on ground elapsed. And it's 15 hours and 28 minutes, you do A and you do B, blah, blah, blah. So what NASA did was that they just changed the time of the clock by 2 hours. They kind of cheated, nothing. And what happened is that the astronauts didn't do any of the TV coverage of the TD&E. In fact, on the transit all the way out to what happens on the outbound transit, we would get a TV broadcast and the astronauts would come on and they would talk to the camera and we'd give you a wee tour of the spacecraft, you know, and then we'd wait till we get to, you know, we'd open up the lunar module and we'd take the camera in and like you see inside. On Apollo 17, they did none of that, there was nothing. So there'd be no TV coverage basically until they actually landed on the moon. You can see on this flight there was going to be 3 EVAs, extravehicular activities, that's your moonwalks. On the 11th of December they would spend 5 hours 19 minutes, on the 12th it would be 6 hours 21, and 13th it would be 6 hours 35. And these were records that lasted well into the 1990s. They've obviously been surpassed now on the International Space Station. So Apollo 17 set a record that it was in the moon space for 12 days and 14 hours. At that time, that was a record. So, moving on to the TV coverage, because I've watched this on the television and it was quite sophisticated and achieving. This is the television assembly which RCA made. And this camera was mounted on the moon rover. And so what that meant when Apollo 17 onwards, unlike the earlier Apollo flights when Armstrong comes down the ladder and he pulls a rope and the wee door opens and the camera pops out a picture, there is no TV on Apollo 17 until the moon cap is set up. And then Cernan is in charge he does all the adjustments. And that camera is not an open TV camera. Well, there's a few, no, I say the televisor is John Logan there, it's the proper name of the television. That's the actual TV that the astronauts had in the Apollo spacecraft so that they could monitor the picture. And this is the camera, the camera lens. And here you've got a motor down here. And this motor is not autofocus. Autofocus did not exist in 1972. This is a mechanical television camera. It's an electromechanical TV camera. The problem with Apollo was that in the early 70s, the colour camera was massive, using calibrators. On Apollo, we used the Baird process of colour television. In 1928, John Logie Baird was the first person to produce a colour picture using a colour filter. Now that was an all-mechanical system. In 1934, he made world's first colour TV camera at the TV studios at Crystal Palace using a mirror drum and a colour wheel. It's called field sequential colour. And during the war, John worked on electronic television. His first electronic colour system involved using a black and white tube with a colour wheel on the camera. And the televisor in the house is a black and white 405 line TV with a colour wheel. And these wheels span at the same and got colour. John sold the patent and ideas to that to his friend Goldmark, who was in charge of CBS. And that enabled CBS to start the world's first colour television service in 1948, running your BBC nonsense of 1967. Having colour TV or having television on the moon was a big argument because originally NASA wasn't going to have it at all. And there was a space journalist that argued the case, and a lot of that, in fact, among the astronauts, it was General Stafford was the one that pushed it. And not only did General Stafford, push it, he also pushed colour because it was going to be black and white. These images were they were slow scan, they would be about 248 lines, and at that time the American picture was 525 lines. It was a lot better than we were still using the primitive 405. Well, we had started on 625 by the end of the 60s. There was a company in Hollywood which did a lot of processing the TV image to clean it up with part of the system. And I had to use Goldstone. I thought it was amazing. I was actually recording pictures via Goldstone last week. The big satellite dish, the Mars station out in the desert and in Australia. And this is very similar to what you saw in Alexandra Palace in 1936, the racks with the monitors built into them. And this guy here is receiving a direct picture from the moon, which is then video recording on these tapes. And then it's relayed back up, and if it was in Australia, I had to go back on the satellite, which went to Houston, and then the TV side of Apollo is absolutely, I don't know why people don't sort of really weigh anything. This is a model of Intel Sat-6. This is how we saw Apollo in the UK. And we saw it thanks to the BBC. We were not going to see Apollo 11 at all because it was a South American company had booked a satellite for some dark football game. And they were not budging. It was quite important to them. And the BBC had to send somebody out with loads of money to try to get this guy to free up that time on a satellite to how important this was. So we didn't have all the satellite channels, obviously, that we have now. Now, reception of Apollo in England or the United Kingdom, or it really was England, it was in Cornwall, you needed a satellite dish this size. So this is called DARPA, and this is the satellite dish that we use historic. And it was used to receive the pictures from the moon into the UK. The BBC did an extensive coverage of this. So you see, unfortunately, the scrubbed all the tapes. There's very little that remains. We've got all the American coverage, you know. Most people, including myself, had to revel the big 1/48 scale Apollo spaceship. You would have that on your, you did the models on the TV set, all the rest of it. If you see the movie Apollo 13, there's a scene in Apollo 13 that demonstrates, John almost demonstrated these text these. Unfortunately, they died in this kit. There's an issue with them, and unfortunately, I was hoping it was going to be reissued for the 50th anniversary, but I don't think we'll see it again. I do have one in the house. So the BBC actually had, and you probably heard me talk about this, a space correspondent on James Buck, who have been on to start off in Tomorrow's World, and he also had Patrick Moore. Patrick was the last of the original lunar observers from before the space age. Patrick was so knowledgeable about the moon that the Soviet government asked him to help them with their space program. And he was also asked to help NASA with their space program. Patrick was very lucky he was there at the right time. The money that paid for Farlings was out of this Moonflight Atlas, which was published in 1971, which made him a millionaire recently. This is some of the older members here who remember Reggie Bosengate on ITN. One of the most famous things from Paul, this is a photograph of the year. I thought I had a picture of Peter Fairley, but it unfortunately disappeared. This Peter Fairley was ITN's, I know it's because I'm using that set, it's not highlighted, so it's not there. Peter Fairley was ITN's equivalent of a James Buck. ITN didn't have the time that that the BBC got because of the way commercial TV was run at the time, you know, they didn't get so I'm going to whiz through some pictures. So this is one of the most famous pictures of the year. That was, I think this was actually taken on the way back. They used the Hasselblad camera with 120 roll film, 1895 technology. Still far superior to any of digital crap today, you know, unless you can afford 30 grand for a digital Hasselblad. On the way out, the astronauts were doing the radiation experiments. What this was actually about was sending people to Mars, but that was cancelled by this point, but they still did it anyway. Then again to lunar orbit, and then the astronauts then transfer to the lunar module and they land on the moon. And you see that by the time that the last Apollo 16, 17, and a whole lot of extra science instruments, you see the aerial there. And after the Apollo 13 explosion, NASA realized we can put a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of cameras and stuff in here taking photographs of the moon and science histories. This the landing site. So these are some of the TV, some of the photography. Then you see the Cernan with the flag there. Another famous picture of Cernan. One of the things that happened, they did these 3 EVAs that were on the lunar surface for hours, was they visited all these different science sites, and the only reason they could do it, they had the motor car. The car, theoretically, you could travel miles and miles, but the problem with it was if the car broke down, you would be dead before you got back to the lunar module because you would run out of air. So they had to plan out where you went so that if the car broke down, you always were within walking distance back to the Challenger. Now, they had a back room of technicians and scientists, so there was a geology back room acoustic. And the thing is that these guys were in there, but you think that these scientists would be controlling the show. They were not. They were in there. Cernan was the commander of Apollo 17, but he wasn't controlling what was going on either, because the real guy that was in charge was Taurus Schmitt. He was a geologist, he knew what he was doing, And Jack would look at different things, and he'd do a certain look at the earth, and Jack would say that you've seen one earth, you've seen them all, look at these rocks. So Cernan was recognising he was going to, Schmitt, what they were going to do, and going to pick up these rocks, and they would, so he was really, he knew his stuff, so we got a lot of the science and all that, and is because we had a real geologist on the moon. And if you were lucky enough to have a colour television, that's this is what can I call it, the pictures that you would get. This is called Tracy's Mountain, and this was named, Eugene named it in honor of his daughter, and they visited this huge rock, and you can see the rover there, the size of it. And here's Jack Schmitt in all his glory, he's got his trowel there, and he, a big smile on his face, it must have been amazing to be a geologist and actually go to the moon, so he had an amazing time. We tried to get Jack to come to Pontefract a couple of years ago, but he insists that he won't sign. A lot of these guys like to sign autographs, and I don't go for that. I go to meet the astronauts, And Jack says, well, I'll come, but I'll sign, I'm just only going to sign copies of my book. So they never, I have an agent, they can, and should have got, they did it again. Now, in the Derby, we'll have a picture of this, the first race in 1930, I think it was the first outside broadcast, first sports event that was ever televised. And people at the racetrack, particularly the people that were watching near the finishing line when the horses came in, couldn't understand what this weird caravan type thing was parked next to the winning post. And a funny little door that opened up and it opened mirror. And inside this was a mechanical television. There was a big mirror drum with 30 mirrors spinning round. It was the world's first, what the BBC calls in the trade, an OB, an outside broadcast unit. This is basically got to be the ultimate outside broadcast unit. The first, you can see the RCA mechanical TV camera, and like Echo, it's got solar panels on it to power it. It's got a satellite dish here, because it's receiving signals from there, but it's also focusing the used S-band, you've got AM radio, FM, UHF, and Apollo, we used S-band for the communications. So they're on the moon, and they're there for these 3 days, and I can actually remember watching this as it happens. Finally, this is the point where they make the historic discovery of orange soil on the lunar surface. They found what we went for. They found traces of volcanism on the moon surface. This little thing here with the colour test card here, that was so that when you got the photos and all the rest of it in colour TV, you could correct the colour. And if you can remember the Viking Mars landing in 1976, he got it completely wrong, a lot like blue skies, just like the artist's concept, until somebody noticed that there was a red wire on the spacecraft, which actually should be blue, and then someone, oh look, the test card's upside down. And then it's time looking back at the Earth, it's time to come back home. This is Gene Cernan picked up a rock and he's made his speech about and peace on earth and that, and one day, God willing, we will return. They drove the car to about a mile from the Challenger and then they walked back. And then lift off. And I love this photograph. Being interested in TV, early mechanical TV. You see all the colours of the rainbow, and that's because one of the drawbacks to the filter wheel was it's too slow, so you get rainbow effects. Now, this is a dead technology that was disinterred for Apollo. They're totally obsolete because Baird was the first person that developed the telephone in 1946. the first electronic colour tube, the Dundee for spinning wheels. And the TV had moved on and it was brought back for Apollo. And it died with Apollo. It was used in the first, the early shuttle program, pre-Challenger. By the 80s, you get CCD chips, so you didn't need mechanical TV at all. And it comes back again in the 90s. Remember the big DLP projector? It rear screen projectors before they had flat panels. And these projectors up here are probably DLP projectors, and they have got the spinning wheel as well. Scotland's contribution to Apollo was not only could you see it in television, you saw it in colour. And there was a Scotsman from Helensburgh that did that. And I had great arguments with my friends in Florida about farms not good. So here's Jack, he's survived and he's just erased us and back the command module. And then it's time for Evans to get his piece of the action because he's forgotten about it. He's on the command module where the two guys, Schmitt and Cernan, are on the surface. And of course, back in the analog days, and I still use 110 cassette. So, 1972 Kodak's big thing was the 110 Instamatic camera. And your film was in a little captured, you just carry on a complex 35mm hunky pull out, and for most people who are not amateur photographers like myself, it's just too complex. Apollo has the same idea as 110 and 126, except it's a lot bigger, obviously. And so this is Ron Evans. He'd been in the Vietnam War as a pilot. This is he was a great guy. Sadly, Ron died in 1990, and like a lot of the astronauts, like John Irving, who died of a heart attack, heart failure. They should probably always certainly go on from flying on the Saturn V and the G-forces. With Artemis, we're doing something about that, which particularly on the re-entry base. So there's a TV image of Ron doing a speedy to get there. And this is the in-flight press conference that you always got on the way back. And sometimes that might have been shown live, or certainly be on the news. And that's a tradition that carried on in the space shuttle. And you read in the 80s that you'd somebody be on the ITN classified at the BBC, the shuttle, and they would show on news at 10 and get snippets. Now, for instance, with the SpaceX and Crew Dragon flights, I can now, the technology there, I can actually sit and watch that in real time as these events happen. And then it ends. It was an amazing time in my life, and I was just in tears. I didn't know that Apollo was going to end. We didn't know. What happened in 1971 for me was 6 months, basically, and then it all went wrong. And it started with the teacher telling me that the cosmonauts had died. And that's not, that space is, it's, I remember running home in tears to find out that, yeah, this was true, it was on the news, and then the Russians had put up the space station, and people didn't think that you could, maybe we died because the human body could survive weights for more than a week and all this. And what I also didn't know was that Apollo was being gutted in 1971. Now, if you remember the British Interplanetary Society, like Margaret Morris, who a friend of mine who was quite famous in the society, you would know that, but I was only a self-started with the money to join the BIS. Margaret's really nice to me. She donated me a collection of spaceflight magazines for the Apollo era, the whole lot basically on the shuttle, I often remember a song in the radio that was the Roger Whittaker, The Last Farewell, is a piece of music that I love because I remember hearing this on the radio at the time and moving back to the moon. Within a matter of weeks, I would get my first real telescope because in 1971 that was another disaster. I would do real friends, we're all getting these telescopes at France, and my dad had got somebody that pops it down, sell you a telescope, so I got a heap of crap, it was total junk, and that took me a year. I've always had to struggle in a lot of ways with stuff. the BBC, just to finish up with the BBC decided that, as this was the last Apollo mission, Apollo 16, they'd sent James Buck over to the Cape, and he did a live commentary at the press site for BBC television, and then he went to Houston and he covered it there. And my friend Patrick, he was just stuck. When they started off in the Alexandra Palace, and Irvin came up to the observatory one day, and we had fascinating conversations for over 2 hours about the BBC's coverage of Apollo. And some of my friends in the air went mental because I wasn't talking about Lake 7 and Doctor Who. They talked about real space. And they moved from Alexandra Palace to Lime Grove, which had a bigger studio. By the time we get to Apollo 15, the BBC eventually gives in and they move to the television centre, and they spend a wee bit of money. So Patrick took his own camera, bought a spool like most people would do, and he took some photographs of the trip. So I'm going to show you Patrick's personal photographs that he took on Apollo 17. You can see the rocket and support structure. This is something that caused problems in Artemis. We don't have that now. Come back to that. The American broadcasters had a lot more money than the British equivalents. So, for instance, CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, had contracts. They got money. They brought in the suppliers, North American, Rockwell, who built the command module. They went to Bethpage, New York, to Drummond, who built the lunar module. So they got full-size spaceships to go the Walter Cronkite could go in, or another guy could go and do that. And Peter Fairley went to rovers and bought some Airfix kits and made them up for ITN. And the BBC panicked at one point, and Matt told me the story how they went to a meeting at Alexandra Palace where the news department was based in the BBC right from 1936 right up to, it was actually November of 60, it would be November 69, they moved eventually to the TV centre. And Matt Irvin said, you've got to make models because he's a great space modeler, and that's what I've built models and bigger models than the kind of kits that Peter Fairley's buying in the shops. The other piece of hardware that the BBC did get was that there was somebody in England at the time was making, you could buy a full-size, your own lunar roving vehicle. I've actually been on one. Myself, Neil, Malone, we sat one in the Space Centre. It's pretty, we got a photo taken and all the rest of it. And so you could see one driving around and it had earth wheels with tyres for, because the one in the moon slightly. So you can see Patrick sitting, the BBC got a full-size lunar, this is actually for Apollo 15 and then I had it through to the end. This is a very interesting picture. In this picture, Patrick's not looking exactly happy. If you knew Patrick, the times he used tempers and all the rest of it, and he wasn't happy because the reason why he would drive back into Chelsea, there was something to do with Apollo 17, and he thought, he wasn't needed, and they knew what they were going to be doing. And this was actually, there's a guy called Eamon Andrews in a program called This Is Your Life. And they would get, and I remember when I used to watch that when I was a kid, and you would get the big red book. So if it was nowadays, it'd be some pop star, sporting personality, this is your life. And this is Patrick, he was caught and he was on This Is Your Life. So they're inside the TV studio with James Buck. And this is Titus, I recognise this one right away. When we were there in 2016, and we probably stayed in the same hotel. And I remember going out the car park, waiting for Graham Gale. He was always late, or he was right away, or they were all standing Mills Observatory, and this sort of vegetation and all the rest of it. So this is obviously, Patrick took this at the hotel where him and James Buck were staying. And this is quite clearly taken in the car. And this is the Cape Canaveral part, because the BBC always got it wrong. Apollo was not launched at Cape Canaveral or Cape Kennedy. It was actually launched in Merritt Island. The original flights, John Glenn went up and Alan Shepard, they were launched from Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral. But there was no room for the Saturn V, it was just too big, so arms and the government had to purchase area of the Merritt Islands. So it reminds me of Thunderbirds, Tracy Island, that's what it's like. But when the Starliner starts flying in May this year, next year, this going to be launched on an Atlas. It's quite historic. This, like John Glenn was launched in an Atlas in 1962, and it will be launched when Sarita goes up when she commands her mission in the Boeing Starliner. She will be getting launched from what was Cape Kennedy or Cape Canaveral. The space shuttle and Artemis visit was launched from Mid-Island. So there's that. Patrick took a picture of the VAV, and I just love this building. You see it from it. Now, when you go on the bus tour, takes you out to the two. The original was going to be 339A and B and C, but then 39C was cancelled pretty early on. And there's halfway on the road on the way out is what I call the Apollo car park. And this would be parked there, but in this case, it's right up on the launch pad is Apollo 17. Any issues with fuel leaks on that rocket, you've got all these gantries and technicians to service that. And in Artemis, NASA could not get the money to build that. That is why they had to roll it back. They had to roll it back to the vehicle assembly building and fix the leaks there. Whereas in Apollo, you could do it at the launch pad. So get ready for, this is the field right next to the press centre, getting ready for waiting for the launch, getting a wee bit darker. And there's Patrick's photograph. I've got more, but I just took that maybe start on, the archetype. Now what kind of happens is, Reg Turnell told me all about this, and how that all the media would then have, once the Saturn V clears the tower, Kennedy, the launch controls, hands over to Houston. And at that point, Houston takes over for the rest of the mission. And at that point, if you're the space journalist, then you've got to start getting out of Florida, and you've got to get a flight on the Eastern Airways, you go to Orlando, and then you get a flight out to Houston, and you're covering it there. When the visitors complex, although people here have been to the Kennedy Space Center visitor complex like in Disneyland type thing nowadays, it's gigantic. But in 1966, it started in a caravan like this. That was all it was, and then there's a wee notice board about Project Gemini. And you could go in there and you could ask questions and maybe buy some souvenirs. So this thing here is, you still see they're still using the 1960s black and white TV symbol. This is BBC TV studio for Apollo 17. And it's parked in the car park at the Johnson Space Center. And this photograph here is taken inside that car. You can see all the probably too light here that you can see all the television cables. And it's a live picture from the moon. And then Pakistan, the full-scale model, lunar module when it gets you there. The first time I ever got to the Kennedy Space Center was in 1990, and they had one of these in the rocket garden. It no longer exists, but you can actually see the Apollo, what was meant to be the Apollo 15 lunar module in the Saturn V Center, and it used to be suspended in the ceiling when I was there, but now they've got it at ground level and you can walk around it. And it wasn't used because you couldn't put a motor car inside. It didn't have the garage for motor cars, so they had to swap out. The command module, that's now at Houston, America. And this is a picture taken from the lunar reconnaissance orbiter. Where you can see the Challenger, and you can see the bookmarks and the driving of the motor car. But in fact, the only thing I really wanted was the Airfix Saturn V, but in fact, I didn't get things to go quite pure, so I didn't end up to activate it to 74 before we got when I was 21 of endings, and you could have free travel again. I went back. I wanted to go back home to be able to talk. My home really is Highland in Glasgow. But when I was 3, we moved to Linwood because my dad worked in the car factory. And Linwood had a lot of similarities to the space city of Titusville. It was booming. And when the Apollo 17 launched, you got all the what we call pink slips. And all the space workers were sacked. And all the shops shut down. All the banks shut down. We'd have to wait another 10 years in London before all the jobs moved to the EU, to France. Or somewhere up here, this is a wee bit light, is this is actually taken at the site of my primary school, which has been flattened, but doesn't exist anymore. And I stood there, and somewhere there, it's there up the clouds, you can see the moon. And Ambassador Mr. Brewster, he's a really great guy, and looking at the folks that I went to, but it's on, there was another picture which was a close-up of the moon, which is on the picture. That's a place where I saw Apollo, and I watched it was at Linwood, you know, and it's just like, in many respects, it's just like science fiction, you know. It is so incredible, you know, that then you get people that just simply don't believe it. And to me, the only thing that can come anywhere near Apollo is what you read in the Bible. Both these things are amazing, and these things are both people are completely unbelievable, but I believe in their true. And finally, just to finish off with this, there's a short movie, lasted about 3-4 minutes. And it is comparing the launch of Apollo 17 with the launch of Artemis. There is sound in this, so I don't know if we're listening. I don't know what's in here. It looks like you're not going to see this unfortunate sound. I don't know how the sound works in here. I got up about 5 o'clock in the morning to see this. At one point, I'd actually hoped, had the pandemic not happened, there was a chance that we could have went over for this. I've waited years for this. I've had to put up with all the crap we get with people running the space program down. Most of these people have a clue what they're on about. The space launch system is absolutely amazing. It's the most powerful rocket that's ever been done. It's opened the door. The door in the heavens has been opened for the first time since 1973. We've now got the capability to go back to the moon. Not just the moon. We've got the capability to go to the moon. We've got the capability to go to the asteroid. And we've got the capability of going to the red planet Mars. I was in tears as I sat and I watched in colour. I'm watching this in colour for the first time, live television from the moon. And then as I'm watching it in real time, then I saw the Earth rise. The last time I saw that, I was 12. I'm now 62. In a few weeks' time, I'll be 63. When the day that you were at ECMO for that event, it was, for ECMO, the public event, that was the day of the return leg, because we went beyond the moon to a distant retrograde orbit. That was the orbit that was proposed when President Obama wanted to catch a rock that was getting dropped from somewhere, was going to go out there and catch a rock. Eventually, we're going to a rectilinear halo orbit, and we're actually going to build a space station there. And that was something that we wanted to do in 1972, and it just never happened. And it means that in the future, if there's an Apollo 13 type incident, you've got a shelter that you can go to. It means now that we can land people anywhere on the moon. But more importantly, it means we can send people to Mars. So what you all found that interesting tonight is looking back, it is the next thing for me, basically, within a matter of weeks, I got my first telescope out. My mum got me out of Charles Branch, made it up. And I was a member of what was the Paisley Astronomical Society. In the first year, 71, 72, it was Dr. Robin Green of the University of Glasgow who took it and taught me a lot about it. An amazing guy, Robin Green. And then there was a guy called Harry Palmer that came along and helped out. And Harry, often it would be a cloudy night. And Harry would be sitting there and he'd be talking about the 6-inch telescope. I don't know what he was on about, it was a 10-inch telescope. He was talking about the problems he was having at Airdrie. Harry Palmer was the Astronomical Society of Glasgow's curator. He was one of my predecessors as a curator of Airdrie Observatory. It was not the first observatory that the ASG has been involved in. And Harry was a fireman in the Glasgow Corporation Fire Department. He was the secretary of the Astronomy Society of Glasgow. And he was the guy that taught me all about different types of telescopes and how they worked, you know. And from then on, I would have an interest in astronomy. And when Skylab went up, I watched that live, but the BBC and that, they just didn't talk about it, you know. Patrick Moore got James Buck on Sky 9, that was about as far as it. And in the summer of 1975, we had the Apollo Soyuz, which was Richard Nixon. That was one of Richard Nixon's things. It was his space policy, you know. And then we got a long gap again until the shuttle, you know. But being actually interested in space before I even knew about Apollo, you know, I'd never lost my interest.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Robert. It's very informative and actually very personal talk. Just before Robert gave the topic, I was saying this was the only Apollo mission very well during my lifetime, so it's quite a landmark, I think, in our space travel and connected right with Artemis. You know, so can we thank Robert for an excellent talk? Andrew? I'll start third one. Did the astronauts know that the final Apollo was?
Yes, they had known that for almost a year before, right? Yeah. Because it was in 1971, or the Nixon administration had cut the budget and wasn't going to be funded. And it was really not so much Richard Nixon to blame as the President Nixon, it was actually NASA's management. You know, they wanted this, they wanted a space station, and then President Kennedy wanted you know, he wanted to move, you know. And they really wanted NASA, they really wanted a space station. And they wanted to, Bernard von Braun came up with the idea that you could use rocket stages to build a space station. So they wanted to Skylab space station. One of my big heroes is Dr. Robert Gilruth, and Dr. Robert Gilruth is basically, you hear a lot about the Russian Sergei Korolev, he's the kind of, he was the father of the Soviet space program. Dr. Robert Gilruth is the father of the American space program. And Bob, you know, his big thing in life is building a boat, and he built this big boat here in Houston, and when Apollo was over, and would go on sail his yacht and build, you know. And he reckoned that this is very dangerous, and that eventually they're going to lose people, because Apollo, nowadays Apollo won't be allowed because of all the health and safety nonsense. Like about 5 years ago, someone said, well, why don't we just bring back the Apollo 1 module? You can't be allowed under the namby-pamby health and safety. It's not just an issue in the UK, you have all this nonsense in America. It's too dangerous, you can't possibly have that, you know. So they thought, well, Bob Gilbert said, we may as well quit the moon while we're ahead, basically. We had a year, I mean, Nixon was petrified after Apollo 13. He just did not want it. He just didn't got, so President Reagan had to face that. He didn't want a space disaster. And that's why it was cut short. But being cut to Apollo 17, Nixon's problem was that there was a presidential election, and he wanted to Apollo 16 and 17 didn't happen at all because there would be a danger there. And there was a fight about it, and Apollo 16 got going. And eventually the president was convinced to just delay Apollo 17 until after the election. So, and then at the end, basically, that was the end. Nixon said, well, why do we have to keep going to the moon? Was a question he asked. You know that. One of the problems, of course, for Apollo was the cost. It cost, this is a suggestive, they did this a few years back, that the cost of the Apollo program was $250 billion. Okay? Now that amount of money, that was a waste of money and all that other money was spent in space. Not a single cent was spent in space, that was all spent on the ground. It wasn't spent on cheap labour jobs in Burger King and McDonald's flipping burgers for the minimum wage. It created real jobs. And these people who had these real jobs had to have a house. They had to have a car. They had money, so they were paying money to the government in tax, and they bought things in shops. Shops opened up, banks opened up, and there was all these jobs that were like in Titusville, the Space City, and elsewhere in the United States that were not connected with NASA, but they were related to NASA. And the only way that Johnson, who was the vice president with Jack Kennedy, could get Apollo through the Congress was, look, the jobs had to be spread out across the whole country because everybody was paying through their taxes. It's not like here for like HS2, for example, which is controversial. All the jobs are down in England, but we're paying up here as well, that nobody benefits from Scotland. So the jobs all benefit. And the thing is, that $250 billion, the government have got the return on the investment back not once, not twice, but 3 times. And then when Apollo ended, there was thousands of people were on the dole, and there was this hyperinflation type thing in the American economy, which happened in 1973-74, which was a direct result of terminating Project Apollo and throwing thousands of workers on the spot.
Yeah, they said Evans had died. What about the other two? Are they still alive?
Gene Cernan died from a few years back. He was the only Apollo astronaut that could not understand my staunch accents. Gene had huge problems with me, and my English friends in Yorkshire would have to translate on my behalf. And no matter what I did, I could talk the way Buzz Aldrin, or coming out from Apollo 7, and Colonel Wharton and I go on my house and fly and all the rest of it. But apart from Valentina Tereshkova, he was the only person because he couldn't speak a lot of English. So sadly, he died in 2017. Jack's still very much alive, and we have another group which sounds quite fit, it's one of the younger one, which my friend Charlie Duke, he's we need to see if we can get him to come to that.
Okay, for one more question.
No, we don't talk.
No, I haven't. So, no call 18, but David, who's taking a effective watch online, says he's lining you up to talk about skyline. So, yeah, people online would say they enjoyed the talk as well. Okay, well, thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Before you go tonight, you would like a calendar, we've got a few left, I think we only have 5 left, if you want the calendar, all pictures taken by members of the society, and all the money going through to help the society and our user. So if you're interested in the calendar, please just think down. Thank you very much.